killed after gunmen stormed the compound and burned it down. Looking at amateur video into NBC News here from the scene, you can hear gunshots going off in the background. Witnesses say the attackers were armed with automatic rifles and rocket-propelled grenades. Libyan forces stationed there are said to have done little to stop the violence. In neighboring Cairo, Egypt, angry protesters scaled the fortified walls of the U.S. Embassy, destroying the American flag, ripping it to shreds, and replacing it with a black Islamic banner. Most of the U.S. diplomatic staff already had been evacuated in anticipation of the protests. Both incidents reportedly went in reaction to a little-known amateur movie produced in the U.S. which ridiculed the Prophet Muhammad. It gained attention overseas in part because an obscure Florida pastor began promoting it. He's the same guy who triggered deadly riots in Afghanistan last year by threatening to burn the Quran. In an apparent reference to that pastor, the American embassy released a statement before the violence erupted, reading in part, "The United States Embassy in Cairo condemns the continuing efforts by misguided individuals to hurt the religious feelings of Muslims, as we condemn efforts to offend believers of all religions. Respect for religious beliefs is a cornerstone of American democracy. We firmly reject the actions by those who abuse the universal right of free speech to hurt the religious beliefs of others." Mitt Romney, who'd been withholding political attacks on the anniversary of 9/11, lifted that embargo shortly before midnight, releasing a statement that blasted the State Department for the statement I just read you. Mitt Romney's statement reads, in part, "It's disgraceful that the Obama administration's first response was not to condemn attacks on our diplomatic missions, but to sympathize with those who waged the attacks." As it said, the embassy's original statement was put out before those attacks took place. They came out later condemning the attacks on their own embassy. The Obama campaign responded to Mitt Romney, writing, "We are shocked that at a time when the United States of America is confronting the tragic death of one of our diplomatic officers in Libya, Governor Romney would choose to launch a political attack." For more on all this, we turn now to NBC News Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel. He's live for us this morning in Cairo. Richard, bring us up to speed as we wake up this morning.
Well, the major development is what potentially happened in Libya, in the city of Benghazi. There are numerous reports that it was not just any diplomatic officer who was killed in that attack, but that it was the U.S. ambassador, Ambassador Chris Stevens, that he died because of smoke inhalation, that he was visiting the embassy, the consulate facility in Benghazi at the time. Those reports have not been confirmed by the U.S. State Department. They are, however, being reported all across the Middle East with live images coming out from in front of the U.S. consulate, now a burned down shell in the city of Benghazi. That would be a major escalation. It would mean that not only did the attackers storm the building in Benghazi, first they attacked it with RPG rifles, then they opened fire on it with machine guns, but they were also, if these reports are correct, still unconfirmed by the State Department, were able to kill the ambassador.
Richard, help us understand as we sit here in the United States, what is driving these attacks? That's a vicious attack if, in fact, what you're reporting is true. As you said, it escalates the situation. Was it really based off a completely unknown, in this country anyway, video that was posted on YouTube that had something like 3,000 views before this story came out?
That was the provocation, and if you remember a few years ago, there was a Danish or a cartoon that appeared in a very obscure Danish newspaper that sparked similar kinds of riots all around the world. So it's not that people in the Middle East are reading Danish newspapers or scouring the internet to look for unwatched videos. This video was deeply offensive, and it became part of a social dialogue in this country. There was a group of preachers here who started talking about it. They started talking about it on local Egyptian television. They riled up the masses. Then the rumor mill began. People in Egypt yesterday started to believe that this movie, which few people had actually seen, but it was described here as a movie, as if it was some major Hollywood blockbuster, was going to be premiered in the United States nationwide tomorrow night on yesterday night on 9/11. And in that environment of religious passions and misinformation and certain groups who are stirring the pot, you had the attack on the U.S. Embassy and the American consulate in Benghazi.
And Richard, before I let you go, what is the scene in Cairo today? We saw the chaos outside the U.S. Embassy and then over the wall at the U.S. Embassy there yesterday. What does it look like today?
That was quite a shocking development. Egypt has a tremendously organized security force. It was organized at one stage to put down protests in this country, and it wasn't organized or mobilized yesterday until after several dozen demonstrators were able to climb over the wall, and those demonstrators were then able to write angry, some of it vulgar graffiti on the outside perimeter walls of the U.S. Embassy. So I know some people in the diplomatic community are very critical that the Egyptian response yesterday was too slow. Now the Egyptian government is taking the exact opposite approach, and there is a human chain of hundreds of shield and club-wielding Egyptian security forces are ringing the U.S. Embassy in downtown Cairo.
Richard Engel live this morning in Cairo, Egypt. Again, we are looking into this story, the one you mentioned. We haven't confirmed it yet, that the person killed at the consulate in Benghazi, Libya yesterday may very well have been Christopher Stevens, the ambassador to Libya, the United States ambassador to Libya. Obviously, that would escalate this thing greatly. We don't have it confirmed yet. We're looking into it as we speak. Richard, thanks again.